drag and bringing drag into the university and doing gender studies and critical race studies in the university teaches us to have sovereignty in our bodies. Right? It reminds us that our bodies have, through the kind of historical work that you do, you remind us that our bodies have been trapped and caged and incarcerated by logics of empire and capitalism, right? And when we teach that to people, it actually gives them the opportunity to reevaluate the terms on which they take their bodies into the world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Suffolk University and Lessons in Drag. I'm Amy Agigian. I'm an associate professor here, founding director of the Center for Women's Health and Human Rights, and also executive director of Our Bodies Ourselves. And we are thrilled to be co-sponsoring this event with the Ford Hall Forum, which we have been privileged to partner with on quite a few events over the years. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement in my very brief remarks. Our Bodies Ourselves acknowledges that Boston is located on the traditional unceded territory of Indigenous people who have been brilliant stewards of the land and water for hundreds of generations. Specifically, the Massachusetts and Wampanoag First Nations peoples, along with particular recognition for the Pawtucket, Neponset, and Nipmuc peoples who have traveled, lived, worked, and cared for their lands in and around Boston for tens of thousands of years. We extend respect and gratitude to all First Nations people who continue to live and steward in the cultural, spiritual, and educational customs of their ancestors. We also acknowledge the overwhelming violence, physical, cultural, environmental, and spiritual, that has been inflicted by colonialism for over 400 years, which continues to this day to profoundly affect the lives of Indigenous peoples. We express our deep respect and appreciation for Massachusetts women, men, children, non-binary people, and elders, both leaders and ordinary people. We also know that a land acknowledgement is not enough and commit Our Bodies Ourselves to honoring and lifting up Indigenous voices and perspectives in all our work. So why is Our Bodies Ourselves sponsoring Lessons in Drag? I'll just say a few words about that. Our Bodies Ourselves, many of you know as the Bible of women's health, which has sold millions of copies since 1970 and is now has found a permanent home at Suffolk University. And many people don't know that Our Bodies Ourselves has very deep queer roots. In 1970, we published one of the first, it was a chapter, and it was called In America, They Call Us Dykes. And it was written by lesbians for a general audience about lesbian lives and health and sexuality and existence. And it was part of the whole queer, it wasn't called that at the time, but the whole queer rights movement that we are still a part of today, and that we're thrilled to bring to this event. So I'm going to be short and sweet. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to know more about Our Bodies Ourselves. You can find us at ourbodiesourselves.org. And I'm going to hand it over to Susan Spurlock, who is the director of the Ford Hall Forum, also here at Suffolk University, where she has been at the helm for over 8 years. And I hope you all enjoy the program very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you here this evening. My heart is full. For more than a century, Ford Hall Forum has hosted open public conversations that help us grapple with the most challenging ideas and cultural questions of our time, from civil rights and democracy to community, identity, and justice. Tonight's program continues that legacy with a timely and transformative topic: the importance of drag, not just as entertainment, but as a mode of theory, critique, performance, community, and world making. We are honored to welcome Kareem Khubchandani, upon the publication of his latest book, Lessons in Drag, a queer manual for academics, artists, and aunties. A book that brings drag into direct conversation with scholarship and everyday life. In Lessons in Drag, Kareem intertwines academic insight with the wisdom and attitude of his drag alter ego, LaWhore Vagistan, to reveal drag's power to teach us about gender, pedagogy, care, and collective futures. Through alternating chapters of critical analysis and personal perspective, the book shows how drag can be a blueprint for critique, care, and teaching and world making, a way of thinking and acting that resists rigid norms and open spaces for more expansive, joyful ways of being in the world. At a moment has become a flashpoint of cultural debate celebrated on stage screens around the world, while simultaneously targeted by legislative campaigns and reductive media narratives. Kareem's work reminds us that drag is political, vibrant, and deeply connected to lived experiences. His writing invites us to look beyond commodified mainstream images of drag, to understand it as a critical practice that challenges binaries, colonial inheritances, and exclusions, and that imagines more inclusive and creative possibilities for all of us. Joining Kareem in conversation tonight is Kris Manjapra, whose own work on history, empire, and global politics makes him an ideal interlocutor for exploring how performance, identity, and power intersect in this moment. We look forward to a rich discussion that sparks and speaks to Ford Hall Forum's mission, bringing people together to engage with ideals that matter deeply to our community and to our world. And a special thank you to the Lowell Institute, whose generous funding makes programs like this possible. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Sue Raymond, Director of the Brandeis University Press.
Well, hello and welcome. And I will keep it brief because I can't wait to hear Kareem, LaWhore, and Kris talk. So it is my pleasure to introduce Kris Manjapra, who is the Stearns Trustee Professor of History and Global Studies and Director of the Arts and Humanities Social Action Lab at Northeastern University. His highly acclaimed and award-winning books include Black Ghost of Empire, Colonialism in Global Perspective, and Age of Entanglement. Kareem Khubchandani, our beloved author, is the author of award-winning books, Decolonized Drag and Accenting Gay Indian Nightlife. He is also the co-editor of the Lambda literary-nominated Queer Nightlife and curator of CriticalAuntiesStudies.com. Kareem is Associate Professor of Theatre, Dance and Performance Studies at Tufts University and Matheson Visiting Associate Professor of Women's, Gender and Sexuality Studies at Harvard University. And LaWhore Vagistan probably doesn't need much introduction, but she is your favorite auntie's favorite auntie. She has shared the stage with RuPaul's Drag Race winners Sasha Velour, Nymphia Wind, and Raja, and has performed at the Wilbur, La Mama, Austin International Drag Festival, Asia Society, Queen's Museum, Lynx Hall, Art Oberon, and Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance. She's been around, that girl. She is the founder of Jai Ho, a queer Bollywood dance party running in Chicago for 15 years now, and Dragistan, an annual showcase of South Asian drag in New York City. She'd like you to watch her TEDx talk on YouTube entitled How to Be an Auntie, and to follow her on Instagram at LaWhore Vagistan. So please welcome Kris, Kareem, and LaWhore tonight. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the Modern Theater. My name is LaWhore Vagistan, but you can call me Auntie. I'm here today to celebrate this brand new book by me and also Dr. Kareem Khubchandani. Today, you'll get to hear from Dr. Khubchandani and some of his favorite academics and drag artists who are going to share the stage with him as we celebrate this gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous new book. Those of you who've never seen a drag show, most importantly, you want to give these drag artists all of your energy and all of your money. If you have tips to give them, please do. But more important than tips, drag artists need to know that they're sharing the space with you. So I hope you'll hoot and holler for these phenomenal performers. I'm so happy that you're here to celebrate the release of Lessons in Drag by Kareem Khubchandani and myself, LaWhore Vagistan. Just out now, very recently, from Brandeis University Press, here at the Ford Hall Forum, the longest running free public lectures in the United States, here in the Modern Theater. So happy you're here. Welcome.
Kareem,
Hi, Kris.
so good to be here. So good to have your book, which I absolutely love, Lessons in Drag, and that we get to chat about it.
Yes, something that was not in our bios is that Kris is a very dear friend. And to me, that's really important. From the moment that I got to Boston, Kris has been a mentor, a friend, someone who has shown me this city, someone who is an auntie, very much in my eyes. So thank you for doing this and being here with me, and for coordinating outfits.
Yes. Hope you're appreciating this. So let's get started. My first question is, how did you fall in love with drag?
How did I fall in love with drag? There are many origin stories to that, and I'll tell you maybe a long one and a short one. I moved to the US in 2000. I was an international student, and I was studying in central New York State, but I would go to New York to go to the Gay Lesbian Center there, and meet other young queer people. And an acquaintance there took me to a queer Bollywood night called Desi-licious in New York City. And it was this incredible space where there were brown bodies, queer, of all kinds of South Asian folks were there, people of all genders and sexualities, and they were dancing to music that was so familiar to me from what I heard my parents playing. And there was a moment that night, this was in 2002 specifically, there was a moment that night that the lights came on and I was like, what's happening? And the crowd cleared out and they knew to clear out, and suddenly a drag performance happened. And this queen named Bijli performed Mardala from the movie Devdas, and that song had just come out. And I was like, am I seeing a celebrity in front of me? The movie was coming to life. My FOMO was coming to life because I was like, how do I be that? And I was completely awestruck by her and by her magnificence. And that was a real moment of falling in love, I was also terrified by how powerful she was, you know. Things I learned later as I went to graduate school and I learned more was that Bijli is not a drag queen and doesn't identify as one. Um, and that did a lot to undo this idea of a singular idea of drag. And this is how I ended up writing about it and thinking more critically about drag, and learning that about her um, has opened up how I define drag, what I want drag to be, what I think drag does. And it's allowed me to even think about how my aunties performing in their living rooms when I was younger, that was also drag to me. In they were drag kings then. So that's Bijli and the Desilicious parties are very much the moment of falling in love with drag as an audience member and as a scholar. But then I also learned to fall in love with it as an artist myself. I'd been performing in drag in Chicago for about 5 years when I was in graduate school, and it was really hard. I found it very difficult. I found it a challenge to accurately put together the performance I imagined. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, and I found this event in a nightclub called Drag Class, where I was given a mentor and I was taught how to do hair, how to sew, how to blend my makeup. Very important. And that was really where I fell in love with drag as a craft, where I understood that it wasn't just this enigmatic performance on stage that's been put on by someone who's good at it. It's actually something that can be learned and a craft that has been honed, and it made me understand the artistry behind it. And that's where I fell in love with it as a performer as well.
So, drag is a craft. In the book, you also say that drag is a resource, and you say that the book is a manual. So then how do you want the book to be used?
So the book, I don't know if it reads as a manual. It's just stories from different pieces and parts of my life. But I do think of it as, I do hope people find it useful and find these stories useful to them. So it's a manual for academics. And I say this because I'm hoping that the book gives academics a way of remembering that we're not just doing the work of the mind, that we do the work of the mind through our bodies. And it's we teach and we write and we enter archives and we enter fields with our entire bodies. And drag has taught me how much the body can do and how much knowledge the body can make in relation to others. So that's what I want academics to take away from the book. For artists, specifically drag artists, I hope it reads as a book of affirmations of how damn brilliant you are and we are as drag artists. Drag, whether it's highly referential or silly or pop culture, is still a deeply rigorous practice that mines music and sound and dress and makes it mean so much more. And so I want drag artists to read this and feel really confident about the art form that they've participated in, because I don't think it's validated often enough. And then for aunties, um, I want aunties who to read this and be affirmed that aging is beautiful and fun and joyful, especially given the many stigmas attached to the term auntie. There's lots of people who are like, don't call me auntie. I'm not that, right? Especially South Asian aunties. Um, and I really hope that this undoes some of the negative connotations around this term, while acknowledging that aunties can be difficult and that difficulty comes from somewhere. And then there are going to be people, I hope, who read this who are not academics, artists, or aunties. And I hope they'll want to be one of those three things by the end. But more so, what I hope the book does is gives people the tools to watch drag, to understand how much is happening in front of you, how much work has gone into those 3 minutes of performance on stage, and the community that raises a drag artist and makes possible those 3 minutes of fascination and joy is actually an entire network and world of care and brilliance and offering and homemaking. So I hope that it gives those who are not familiar with drag an understanding of how expansive and loving a practice it is.
We're getting like deeper into the book now, and I absolutely love the way you begin the book. You and LaWhore begin the book together. I love that this is a book by you, but it is a book by two, that it is a dialogue between you both. So could you just talk a little bit about why do you begin the book in the way you do? What's the importance of having LaWhore Vagistan and you, Kareem, both writing together?
It's this, right? It's writing is lonely, and if I was invited to give a talk, I would feel lonely on stage, and I wanted to be with someone. I wanted the format of this to be a conversation, and that's how the book opens, as a conversation between LaWhore and Kareem. um, because I scholarship has been lonely work for a long time, and I'm always looking for ways to undo that. This is why I always write in coffee shops, is just to be around people. um and so I imagine this scene as happening in a coffee shop as well. But I open with the interview because, one, the interview is actually a really important form of feminist and queer scholarship. It reminds us that scholarship isn't just made by the authority or genius alone. It's always made in relation to someone else and in conversation with someone else. So I think it's a really important feminist queer tradition of scholarship. um, it's a conversation with me and myself. um, but I'm also following, again, Black feminist traditions. uh, Bell Hooks very famously interviews Gloria Watkins herself in Teaching to Transgress. And it's this way, asking yourself questions is a way to press yourself to think a little deeper and push a little harder, and to not rest as a scholar, but to actually have more fun with your thinking. And so that's why it starts with the interview. And then each chapter alternates. It's me and then LaWhore. And so I write how to research, how to teach, and how to write. And she writes how to be a drag queen, how to be an auntie, how to be a map. Um, and in between are the WhatsApp messages we exchange as we pass the essays back and forth, and she tells me what she thinks about my writing. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And it, from the reader's perspective, it's there's such a flow and there's so much joy in the actual reading experience, which you don't get in the traditional academic book. And nevertheless, there are such profound lessons about the subject and the multiple beings that cohabitate in us. Um, the the drag of the subject and the
Yeah.
way that we're always dressed in various ways and performing in various ways. But also, you have a lot to say about our world and the way that we can see our world, the way that we can remake our world. And so, given what you and LaWhore have recently been through, what your body has recently been through, as it's been made a target from of the far right, and you have been tweeted at and tweeted about by Elon Musk recently. What is it about you, Kareem, that's so dangerous?
Is this a question about how beautiful I am? No, well, that was definitely LaWhore answering that. But this is what she's given me, right? And this is what I think is dangerous, is that drag and bringing drag into the university and doing gender studies and critical race studies in the university teaches us to have sovereignty in our bodies. Right? It reminds us that um, our bodies have, through the kind of historical work that you do, you remind us that our bodies have been trapped and caged and incarcerated by logics of empire and capitalism, right? And when we teach that to people, it actually gives them the opportunity to reevaluate the terms on which they take their bodies into the world. And then teaching performance in the university, and specifically drag, actually gives students the tools to make their bodies on their own terms and not in service of the state, not in service of the heteronormative family, not in service of all kinds of violent nationalisms, right? And that to me is really, that's the project of LaWhore Vagistan, right? Undoing the nationalisms that have really bound me and my family in many ways. And so teaching these kinds of things in the university is what is so dangerous. And I like that. And it's scary. It was a scary moment, and it's scary to be dangerous, but I'm not the only one doing it. I can see many people in this room who do exactly that work, and I'm really in love with them and proud of them for doing exactly that work. Dangerous work is really important, and dangerous work can look beautiful.
So, let's talk about one of the lessons in drag. What is a lesson that you would give to those of us who are experiencing the ways in which coordinated fascist strategies in this moment are seeking to put us in fear, to abuse, to humiliate, and ultimately to disempower, first of all, minoritarian subjects, but all subjects, and transform this thing that we try to work at, called a democracy, into some other kind of regime. What is a lesson in drag that speaks to where we are now?
I would say you don't have to know it all, and you don't have to do it alone. And this is the auntie ethos of the book, is talking about networks of care. But I'm thinking about when I saw those clips from the New York Post and from Elon Musk, and was really terrified about the implications of where that may take the conversation and take my life and my image. People stepped in to teach me how to manage my image online. People with different kinds of expertise on digital safety, things I had not thought about, actually stepped in to say, here's what you can do to take care of everything from your identity to your money to your home. And I I was astounded at how much I don't know and how much people could teach me. And this is something that, going back to drag class, there was so much I didn't know. I'd been doing drag for 5 years, and there's so much I didn't know. And having people actually teach me how to put a wig on, right? Like, it feels like especially when you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, right? It feels like you're supposed to know everything about drag to do drag, but actually people have different pieces of expertise, right? And if you know that you can lean on others to open their homes, their minds, their resources, their skill sets to help you grow and feel safer in your body. And then in the case of what happened 2 months ago, or to feel more beautiful in your body, as happened for me in drag class, I feel like that's one of the lessons, is that the aunties are out there if you're ready to meet them and learn from them.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And that drag is dependent on the community of care, that
Yes.
it exists because of that community.
And community of care, yes, but also like I said, expertise. Some people are just so good at what they do, and you just have to ask them if they can open up their resources to you. Yeah, the person who taught me about digital safety was a communication studies graduate student, and someone who calls me auntie, who I was like, you're a gift to me, right? And this is why I said I hope people will want to be academics, artists, or aunties after this, especially aunties, right? I think we should all want to be the person who can open up our homes to say, come, learn, eat, relax.
There's another lesson that I really, really loved in your book, which is that fun is a methodology, that play is a methodology, but it is also not opposed to rigor. So
Mhm.
can you talk to us a little bit about the role of fun as a way of doing and knowing?
Yeah, so this comes from um, in the chapter called How to Teach. I talk about how I started going to class, teaching some of my classes as LaWhore. So I wouldn't announce it, and 10:30 in the morning, LaWhore will show up to teach, and which means I had to get up at 6 a.m. to like start getting ready, which is, I'm not a morning person either. I research nightlife, right? Um, so LaWhore shows up and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Your professor has diarrhea and will not be able to make it today. So I'll be your substitute teacher." And of course, they all know who LaWhore is. They've seen her music videos. They know that I do drag. But something about her arriving in the classroom, they play along, right? They're ready to play. So they will call her Dr. Vagistan the entire time. They will refer to me in third person. And so one is that's a reminder that play is possible in the classroom, but that play also produces a certain amount of rigor from them, because I'll say, "Oh, so what unit of the semester are you in? What have you been learning from Dr. Khubchandani?" And they will have to answer. And I'll say, "Oh, is that the actual definition? Can you give me the definition of ethnography?" And then they actually have to mind their brains to answer LaWhore's questions, but they play along the entire class. And then I'll come back to class as me the next time, and they were like, "Oh my God, you missed such a fun class." And there's some, one, I got to push them to be so specific and so accurate and so careful with everything I'd taught them just by coming as someone else, and they played along and they worked really hard. And each time I do this, it reminds me how much the body matters in the classroom. And so this is where I think play can give us rigor. And the critique of rigor more generally that comes out of queer studies and Black feminist studies is that there can't be one kind of rigor either. And I think the place I've seen the most rigor more than any classroom is at a drag show, and specifically drag roulette. I don't know if you've seen drag roulette, but at the end of a drag show, the queens will ask, "What song do you want us to perform?" And the audience will give them up to 30 different songs. And it's likely these performers will know all of the words to all of those songs that have been randomly generated by the audience. But that these drag artists' bodies are a database, of pop culture and scandal, and both the show and scandals in general. And um, of just cultural history and song lyrics, and not just song lyrics, but the meanings of those song lyrics and why they were written and the different versions behind them, right? There's so much knowledge in these performing bodies, and that is rigor, right? And I think we forget to look for rigor elsewhere. We're looking for it in these canonical texts, and it's actually all around us, and it can be rigor can actually be so pleasurable.
Well, Kareem, I also want to ask you about the aunties and the divas in your life. Can you tell us about who are the aunties and the divas who are part of your origin story?
Um, So when I was doing research for my first book, Ishtael, Accenting Gay Indian Nightlife, I learned that I didn't have divas. I was interviewing queer Indian men both in Bangalore and in Chicago, and they all had this narrative of divas. and the divas that shaped them, that gave them femininity, that made them feel beautiful, that their parents scolded them for mimicking. And they would talk about Madhuri Dixit and Sri Devi as their divas. They would just come up over and over again. So I ended up writing this chapter about two Bollywood divas and their relationship to queer communities. But I was feeling like, oh, but who are my divas? Like it's such an origin story for so many queer folks, and I didn't have that until I realized that my connection to Madhuri and Sri Devi was not me watching them and mimicking them, but me watching my aunties mimic them and me mimicking my aunties when they performed as Madhuri and Sri Devi. But also Bollywood men like Raj Kapoor and Shami Kapoor. And so I would see my aunties doing these performances, rehearsing for their like community shows in the living room. And that was where I learned this like all of these embodied resources of how to be sexy and how to flirt and how to be beautiful. And I would watch the videos of them performing. And so I write about my aunties as my divas, right? But it was also queer communities that taught me how important divas are to having a genealogy to queerness that is not always about the arriving at the gay club and hearing Cyndi Lauper for the first time, right? It's like divaness and queerness and excess and fabulosity are actually around us all the time. And we have access to them in ways that aren't always about arriving at the like out gay version of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's going to be the coming work of yours, but I am just so grateful that I have ontellectual and ontology as terms that I know are now out there. I mean,
Yeah.
thank you.
My because I mean I think this is what drag has brought to my scholarship is puns, actually. But my favorite for the Foucauldians in the audience is panopticon. There's the sociologists are right there.
Another book title. I love it. I love it. Now I want to ask you about vulnerability. You provocatively say in the book that vulnerability is overrated. And yet, nevertheless, by the end of the book, the last chapter, you're being super vulnerable. You know, I actually took down a sentence that was very, very touching, where you say, when you talk about your mother who passed away recently, and you talk about wearing her saris when you perform, and you say you can be with her now that she is gone by wearing this fabric, by draping yourself in these saris. And so you are being very vulnerable. But you're pointing out something that's tricky in the connection between personal narrative and critical knowledge. And so what are you telling us about vulnerability?
Um, I I do mean it when I say vulnerability is overrated in a very particular sense of performing our oppressions and our traumas in order to feel like the correct subject that others should listen to. You should listen to me because I've been hurt, and you should be in on the conversation because I'm an open wound. And I think that at least I can't have that expectation of strangers to hold and take care of that narrative for me. And maybe that's because I'm blessed enough to have people around me to do that caretaking when I need it. But what performing as LaWhore, and I think a couple of things happen there is like when someone sees you um, start with your trauma, they're like, oh, that's never happened to me, so I don't have an in here, so I'm just going to watch from a distance. Or they're like, oh, that exact thing has happened to me, and they cathect too closely and don't see your story for yours. It becomes theirs. And so those are the things I worry about with that approach to performing vulnerability. But performing as LaWhore has taught me that there are other versions of doing vulnerability that are not simply starting with grief, right? And as you point out, I end the book with grief, but it's in performance where over the course of time, that I see people fall into the same space that I am in, whether it's a 3-minute performance or it's a 90-minute show, that as the audience falls into time with LaWhore, we can actually share and talk and be with each other. And so LaWhore tells Kareem, you're being really narrow when you say vulnerability is overrated, because there are other ways to think about it, about being with and being present with others in a way that is mutual and is not about power structures. And so I'm hoping that as people read the book, they spend time with me to understand how I get to grief, as opposed to starting with it. That I am available and accessible, but not on these like cut and dry, clear terms of things that they know, but things that they get to know about me over time.
I'm hearing in your answer, there's something about the power of presence. There's something about the way that LaWhore brings the others to be more fully present. You talk in the book about the physicality of the practice. You talk about the exertion, the sweating, the breathing heavily, the working body. It's not just that you're doing drag, you are working drag,
Yeah.
you're hustling. And so can you talk to us about that hustle
Yeah.
and what it does?
Yeah, I use the word hustle, and it's now that you're asking me that question that I realize, like, I actually really mean that term. You know, I think about being 19 years old in college at Colgate University, sociology major, reading the Communist Manifesto, and my professor really like drilling into me, capitalism is everywhere. And all the work you do is towards is towards accumulation. And that's sort of stuck inside of me. And now I have this compulsion to look for, okay, what is the other kind of work that is actually about gifting and breaking apart that obsession with having. And drag is one of it, is one form of it, I think. I mean, there's a RuPaul's Drag Race drag, right? That is capitalism personified. I'm very proud in Decolonized Drag, I coined the term neoliberalism, because RuPaul loves a pun with Ru, her name in it. But like, I think that, yes, there's a version of drag that's been co-opted, but I see drag artists who are spending more money than they earn to perform and to create community and to make people feel good about themselves. And it's a hustle, right? It's, getting home late, and getting home in Boston late is hard. But people do this incredible work as a gift, right? And hopefully they're making something. And the original version I saw of this beautiful world making at the expense of one's own self, but as a way of lifting up community, was my mom's work. She would never have called herself an entrepreneur or even a fashion designer, but the way she paid for my college education was by doing bespoke fashions for her friends at home, for her friends and friends of friends. And it was always to make just enough money to have a little bit of beauty in her life and to pay my school fees. But I saw that hustle, right? It was inefficient work because she loved going and touching fabrics. She loved sitting with the tailor and sketching. And it took hours on hours to make one look, but she loved doing it. And so that's the hustle, right? That there has to be a way of working that is about beauty and community and making resources rather than taking them.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about somehow the book by Lewis Hyde, The Gift, as you're speaking about
Yeah.
hustling and its connection to the gift. And, and just what's resonating in my mind is that gifting makes us human or keeps us human. And it also is a rebellious act. The gift, to give a gift can be a rebellious act. Let me ask you a final question, and it's taking us to a specific moment in the book, which I think will allow you to conclude our question and answer, by maybe taking us on an itinerary, and that whole theme of the map and being a map, is something that you and LaWhore also write about. So in this moment, Arshia Haq, who is the founder of Discostan in Los Angeles, is in the club, and she's spinning a 10-minute track of Sufi music that she herself has recorded at the Lal Shahbaz Qalandar shrine in the Pakistani province of Sindh. So all of that is happening on the dance floor, and you're there and you write, giving myself up to that track, taking its permission to indulge in repetition, I too give myself to the audience. So can you talk about that moment?
Yeah. So that's I'm one of those people who, when you ask where you're from, where are you from? I'm like, do you want the long story? Because there are just so many points on the map that are part of my itinerary. But that song is one that feels like home, right? And I think for a lot of queer and trans folks, home is a vexed subject and topic. And I'm always looking for where I call home, and sometimes it's in music, right? And it's in that song that is from the province that my family's from, that was displaced out of Pakistan at partition, right? And so music holds histories of colonialism and movement and maps. And so hearing that song in a nightclub, and it's the wrong kind of music, right? It's music that was recorded at a shrine that is now playing in a nightclub. It does something to you, right? And this is like DJs are magical artists who can create, just like drag artists. DJs can also create these unexpected opportunities to encounter ourselves. And that was the gift that Arshia and Rekha and Lal and several others in that moment in the book gave me, to encounter myself and to make a home for those 10 minutes of dance, and I talk about how I translate that into a performance for the audience, but in a drag performance. But that moment in the club really sort of gifted me a home in the nightclub.
Wow, thank you. I think we want to open it up now to question and answer with the audience.
I loved the puns on the aunties. So let me just start with a very simple question within the context of this conversation. We have a question. What is the meaning of auntie?
Oh, okay, great. Yes. Auntie, so for me, auntie refers to the women around my mom who raised me. But I was at a conference and I was giving a talk about these folks, and I was talking about them as my aunties. And someone in the audience actually said, you know, your experience about aunties is different from mine. And I was like, and she made a generalization about aunties, and I was like, oh, there's actually an archetype of the auntie in South Asian communities. So in South Asian communities, the auntie usually refers to someone of your parents' generation, who is at the edge of the family. She could be related or not, and she's often imagined as disciplining young people, being like, why aren't you getting married yet? Who's going to marry you if you dress like that? Are you sure you want to wear that crop top out? Like, that's the stereotype of the auntie. By spending more time actually researching the figure of the auntie in South Asian communities, but also Korean ajumas and Caribbean tanties and all these other figures of feminine folks who are at the border of the nuclear family, The aunt, I've understood the auntie to be this really fascinating border figure who's at the edge of the family, edge of the university, edge of the nation. That figure who can either foreclose what this is, right? You have to stay within your family, you have to behave in heteronormative ways, or the auntie is that figure who can open the doors and say, I won't tell your mom that you've been out late. You go have fun, right? You want porn? Here's my password, right? Like, so I think about aunties as these kind of dual figures, and I'm not the only one, right, doing this work. There's so I put together this symposium that's online. You can watch it, called Critical Auntie Studies, in which people from all different diasporas are thinking about who else is doing the work of care beyond the mother, and beyond the family, and in what ways are they creating queer and trans futures, feminist queer and trans futures, rather than foreclosing them. So that's what I'm thinking about when I say auntie.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more Zoom question and then we'll move to the audience. Sharon of Black Teachers Matter, Inc. asked the question, if you answered this a little bit, I think, how has the current political climate in the United States affected you?
I mean, I've talked about how it affected me, and I think there's both an attack on drag and an attack on higher education, and so I'm experiencing that intersection. But I think it's affecting my students, who are seeing resources disappear on their campuses. Like, that's who I'm really worried about, is people who, we have had sit-ins and protests that have secured, again, to use that word, care for young people's lives and bodies that were not ever imagined to be inside of the university. And we've invited them in, and they have demanded the kinds of structural changes. And suddenly we're seeing universities disappear those things, and disappear departments as well, right? So it's terrifying. But I'm really, who I'm really worried about are young folks, international students, undocumented folks, of course, right? Like, that's, and maybe the way to talk about how it affects me is that I talk about what kind of work the university expects of queer faculty of color. My colleagues and I are going to end up having to do more care work, right? That is not compensated. And this is where I think auntie work always happens, at the border of the campus, right? It is not institutional work. It's often not institutional work, or it's not recognized by the institution. But there are just so many more precarious folks on our campus, and we do, and I'm saying we do have to take care of them, but it also means our workloads increase in that time. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My name is Hope. I work at Tufts University. Hi, Dr. Manjapra, Dr. Khubchandani. So I just want to say, I think that you look radiant. And I was thinking a lot, Dr. Manjapra, you had mentioned the power of presence. And I know that fashion plays a really integral role in your life. And I usually think of you as prints on prints on prints, color on color on color, as like a staple, right? So can you tell me more about your choice of Cloud Dancer chic right here in this auditorium? Thank you.
Oh, I wish I could have said I planted that question, but because it's going to be my favorite question. I'm sorry, everybody else. So I have this closet. This look has been in my closet for 2 years and has not been worn ever. And so when I asked Kris, "What are you going to wear?" Because I did ask Kris, "What are you going to wear?" And he said, "All black and flowy." I was like, "Okay, I know exactly what I'm wearing then." He's the alphabet to my Glinda. Yeah, she wanted to come out. Yeah, yeah, that's all. But you know, I appreciate the reminding others out there that I am obsessed with prints, patterns, weaves. Again, you know, my if it's not clear already, I'm obsessed with my mom, right? And the way that she worked with fabric, we would be out shopping and she could just touch the fabric and know what it was. And like, this is like, that is the embodied knowledge of, you know, and the rigor, right, of doing this work over and over again, that just with a touch, you actually know what is happening inside of a fabric. And that's something I think about all the time. And that's where I want to get, that's the deep auntie knowledge I wish I want to get. And yeah, so that's where my love of fashion comes from.
Another question?
Hi.
Hi.
I want to ask you, remember in the very beginning of the talk, you talked about the first person that you saw in drag in it, and you thought it was so incredible. But then later on, you found out that she didn't call herself a drag queen. And I was wondering if you could tell that story a little more, because why would you not call yourself a drag queen when, if you could?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very great question. So I was talking about Bijli, who is an incredible South Asian dancer in the New York area. And I saw her perform when I was 19. And to me, any performance happening in a nightclub was a drag show. That's how I read it. That's what I understood was going on. And then I eventually watched a documentary about her called Bijli and it's on YouTube, and please watch it. It's 20 minutes long. It's excellent. But in there, she says that I I want to be desired in the nightclub. I want to be desired as a woman. And everybody thinks I'm a drag queen, and drag queen means man performing as woman, right? And so the, she reminded me that as expansive as we want the word drag to be, there are very particular understandings of, or there are very common understandings of what it is. And this is why in my book Decolonize Drag, I actually work really hard to undo that our singular understandings of drag as cross-dressed performance or cross-gender performance, to make sure that trans artists and non-binary artists are fully understood to be doing drag, even if they are not crossing gender as we understand it, but rather aestheticizing it for the purposes of pleasure and politics and joy and community and beauty. But you know, I had been telling the story of Bijli for a full decade, being like my first drag queen, my first drag queen. But hearing how she actually understood her desirability in the nightclub made me understand that we have to talk about drag, right? We actually have to sit and theorize it and think about it, especially when, you know, we've got a show now that's been running for 18 years, RuPaul's Drag Race, and its franchises, that is producing fairly singular understandings of what this art form is, or when it explodes those understandings by having trans men or trans women on the show, it makes it look like it's a pioneer of that, when trans women have been in our drag communities for so long, who they have set the precedent for us, right? They have set the bar for what performance looks like, and we often can't imagine them in our space as drag, right? And so that to me, that story about realizing how she understood herself and the limits of the nightclub, made me want to write about drag, and made me want to think with drag artists about how they do their gender and practice gender.
Very humdrum question about
Excellent.
This book to me, this book couldn't be a first book in the profession that we share, but will that always be the case, and how do we advise our students? I just wondered if you could think about that.
Yeah. So this there's a little story in this book about how when I sent it out when I sent my first book, Ishtael, out for review, the reviewer actually said, LaWhore is all over this book, but why doesn't she have a chapter? And you know, and I was performing in drag in the very nightclubs I was writing about in that book. And I had just finished graduate school and I just didn't have the confidence to play with form and to disrupt. And because I write about these very unserious things like drag and nightlife and popular dance, I feel like I have to be really serious, you know. And I've had that critique. You know, people will say at a conference after I present, they're like, "Oh, your research sounds so fun," and fun becomes a dirty word, right? And so I'm hoping that, you know, okay, yes, this is my third book, but I'm hoping that my students and the folks whose work I advise can indulge more in this and see that it is rigorous practice. And you know, I was just on a dissertation committee for a performance studies student who was doing a lot of autoethnography, who was writing poetry as part of his practice. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful to read, and it was so deeply thoughtful. And so I know that young scholars can also, with their first book, with their dissertation and their first book, produce beautiful things. And I hope that they will do that, right? And will take the risks. And so hopefully now that I'm an associate professor and I will be reviewing those books, right? Like I'm hoping that there are more folks, sympathetic folks on this side of the table, you know, and I can't thank the reviewer of this book enough, who was actually like, you can be more creative, right? You can really push your voice. And you know, we do need more folks like this in the academy. And we need the care of our editors who are like, I'm going to find the right person. Thank you, Sue. But I'm going to find the right person to review this work who gets that the body and performance and creativity matter in making scholarship. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask kind of a more fun question, I guess, but I was wondering, what are LaWhore's favorite songs to perform to? Because I heard Uyama and I got excited. So
Yeah. I don't know if my body can do that anymore. That I have not done Uyama, but I do love this song. Favorite songs, Celine Dion's "It's All Coming Back to Me Now," the full 7.5-minute version, never the 4-minute, the Kajrare from Banti or Bubbly, and again the full version, not some like, because that is also a 7-minute song. And then the song that appears in the book, that is the center of the chapter, called How to Be a Map, called the Madam Mast Kalandar. And it is not an easy song because, as I read, it's a Sufi song. It's got it's sort of circular and repetitious, and it's not kind of like a nice clean arc of a pop song. And it really makes me work. It makes me work to be there with the audience. But I seem to like these like really long songs. What my friend Veronica Blows calls durational drag. But there's something about like being on stage for longer that works you and works the audience, and then you're like there and you're in it and you're committed. So yeah, those are favorites. Thank you for that.